Hello everybody and welcome back to another brand new Doctor Who video where we are just a few days away from the return of Doctor Who with Doctor Who Flux or Series 13. I still haven't quite decided how I should generally title it. I think we're going to go with Doctor Who Flux. But today I thought it would be a good idea to kind of have a quick little look back at the previous two series, given, you know, Series 12, even Series 12 was 18 months ago or 20 months ago, and Series 11 was obviously 3 years ago, near enough now. So I'm sure some of you might not quite remember everything that happened, how it all begun, where things went. And so I felt it was a good idea to just give a quick recap over the previous two series of Doctor Who. So yes, we focus on the Jodie Whittaker era of Doctor Who so far. And I guess you could kind of say it started as far back as 2016 when it was first announced that Stephen Moffat was leaving Doctor Who and Chris Chibnall would be taking on the writing role. I believe that was mid-January 2016. So 5.5 years ago, or nearly 6 years ago, since kind of the first time we knew that this is what the new era would look like. After that, we heard basically nothing for the best part of a year and a half until they announced Jodie Whittaker as the new Doctor in July 2017, and then announced that Bradley Walsh, Tosin Cole and Mandip Gill would come in as the three companions. That was in October 2017. Then we went through a year or so of production, obviously filming the programme and getting it all together before the first series, Series 11, aired in early October 2018. So near enough 3 years, I think about 3 years and 3 weeks ago, basically. So it's quite nice that we've kind of ended with the last series airing in a similar time period to the first series. And also, you know, next year the Centenary special will probably air around the time, sort of 4 years on from when Jodie's first actual episode aired, which I also think is just a nice bit of kind of a nice pattern that's kind of accidentally emerged there.
All of this is new to me. New faces. New worlds. New times. So if I asked really, really nicely, would you be my new best friends?
Right, this is gonna be fun.
So Series 11 is a series that I feel like was one of the most divisive for the fandom. I feel like it was a series that just generally wasn't that popular, which in some ways is a bit of a shame, and rewatching it again more recently, I definitely don't think it's necessarily as bad as people said it was. I don't think it's a particularly amazing series, but I feel like there's a good set of solid episodes in there. So the series began with The Woman Who Fell to Earth, where we obviously meet the 13th Doctor, we meet Ryan Sinclair, we meet Yasmin Khan, and we meet Graham O'Brien. We also meet, obviously, Graham's wife, Grace, in that first episode before she's ultimately killed in the during fighting off Tim Shaw and the Stenza creature in that first episode. The thing with a lot of Series 11 episodes is it doesn't really establish anything that becomes a long-running arc or narrative or something that's really relevant today. The storyline with Grace's death and how Graham kind of dealt with that was kind of really dealt with throughout Series 11, and it took until the final episode, the Battle around Skurav Kolos, for that really to be all wrapped up. But then after that, that was kind of it. I think we got a brief moment of it in Can You Hear Me in the previous in Series 12, but apart from that, that's very much a storyline that was done and dusted in Series 11. But yeah, that was opened up at the beginning of the series. Then we had the Ghost Monument, which is basically as the Doctor getting her TARDIS back, and not a lot of actual plot happens in an episode. But obviously that episode is also significant for it giving us the first, at the time, slightly bizarre mention of the Timeless Child. I remember doing a video on it at the time 3 years ago and being like, I've got to talk about this because it sounds really interesting, but we have absolutely no really information or anything. And it seemed like it was something that was going to fairly quickly or significantly be picked up on, and of course it ultimately was, but it took a lot longer than I think maybe a lot of us expected, because the Timeless Child was never mentioned again in Series 11, apart from that one moment towards the end of episode 2, the Ghost Monument, where the sort of sheets creatures, I don't know how we can describe them, frankly, so for some reason seem to know about the Doctor being the Timeless Child, which is obviously what we learn ultimately, and give us that little hint, that first little tease there. But obviously, as I say, it's something that's not explored again until Series 12, which we'll come on to in a minute. So after that, the Doctor gets the TARDIS back. We run through Rosa, which is a great episode. Personally, I think Rosa, obviously dealing with Rosa Parks and her story and the whole story about the bus, which I think is a fantastic story, really interesting historical Doctor Who story. Just a really, really great watch. I think, there's not much more to say than that. Then we get Arachnis in the UK, which introduces us to the character of Robertson, Jack Robertson, who ultimately turns up again in Revolution of the Daleks, which we'll touch on. He's kind of a Trump-like character. He kind of says he doesn't want to be like Trump, but he's actually portrayed as a sort of slightly crazy, power-mad sort of businessman who wants to become, president of America. It's basically who he is. And we deal with giant spiders being caused by radioactive waste. And that kind of completes the first sort of 4-episode arc that we kind of get to the series, because it feels like every episode kind of leads into the next one and those first 4. And we kind of reach this moment at the end of episode 4, Arachnis in the UK, where after the companions had kind of been forced into it, they'd been accidentally teleported with the Doctor at the end of The Woman Who Fell to Earth, and then kind of just had to roll along with things for the next couple of episodes before finally getting back to Earth at the beginning of Arachnis in the UK. And then they make that decision at the end of episode 4 that they do want to stay with the Doctor, that actually life is better with the Doctor than, back on Earth, and they want to experience more adventures and things. And so it kind of releases the shackles of, wanting to get back to Earth, and instead sort of lets them go off on more, just go off on adventures, basically, without any restrictions or any limitations or any connections back to Earth or anything, at least for a period of time there. From that, we head to the Saranga Conundrum, which is a pretty damn average episode. I don't think it's awful. I watched it recently. I don't think it's completely terrible. We meet the Pating. We're on a sort of space hospital sort of ship, with the Pating trying to chase around and kill everybody, or not kill everybody, but eat all the energy and therefore eat the ship. And it was going to be a disaster. But obviously the Doctor saves the day. There's some clunky exposition and clunky dialogue in it, and it's not particularly great. And that's kind of it. Demons of the Punjab is a much, much better episode. It feels like throughout the Chris Chibnall era, but particularly in Series 11, the historicals are where they get it right. Demons of the Punjab is kind of a bit playing on Father's Day, the idea of the companion wanting to go back and meet a family member when they were younger for whatever reason. Yaz wanted to go and find out about her gran before she got married, and then there's this whole interesting storyline about the partition of India and Pakistan, which is really interestingly explored. Sort of monsters that aren't really monsters, ultimately, with the Thijarians. That's a tongue twister of a name if I've ever seen one. And ultimately, you get some real emotional beats in that story as the man who was going to marry Yaz's grandma is ultimately killed because he wants to, marry someone he's basically not allowed to, and they don't want to be moved out of where they are. And it is, it's fantastic. It's hard-hitting stuff. I think for Doctor Who, it's pretty kind of dark and grim and serious, and just kind of shows the breadth and depth of what Doctor Who as a format can do, I think. And that is one of the big positives of Series 11, is I think when you watch through the 10 episodes fairly quickly, I guess, you can kind of see that they are telling many quite different stories and really showing you that Doctor Who can be kind of anything. It can be historical that doesn't really have any aliens and is just experiencing a historical event and historical sort of, the emotions of a bad historical event. Suddenly next week we're on a space hospital. Suddenly next week we're meeting radioactive spiders. Like, it can really do a bit of everything. And I think that as much as not all these stories are particularly great or always work, they do just show the versatility of the format of Doctor Who, which I think, we've seen throughout the history of the show, but I just think that's particularly apparent in Series 11 because you've got 10 individual stories rather than any two-parters or big arcs and narratives and all that kind of thing. Then we have Kablam, where we get a delivery for the Doctor in the TARDIS, which is a Fez, so, calling back to the Matt Smith era. They end up in what is basically a warehouse of space Amazon in Kablam, and ultimately it'll, there's a whole conspiracy in there to try and destroy the robots and destroy Kablam as a thing because it's taking over all the jobs of the humans, being replaced by robots. And this guy's like, I want jobs for the real people and not just for robots, and he ends up getting killed at the end. There we go, spoiler alert. It's a good episode. It's pretty solid. Like, it's just nothing special, and there's not really that much to say about it. Go and watch it. It's quite good. The Witchfinders, episode 8. We're nearly there through Series 11. Another historical, a strong point of Series 11. Again, I think it's probably the weakest of the 3 historicals of Series 11. Like, it's behind Roja and the Demons of the Punjab, but it's by no means bad. And I think that, it's just an enjoyable 45 minutes. is the best I can describe it. Obviously, it's all about witches. You get King James in there. Very fun, a fun performance from Alan Cumming. It's a little bit hammed up, but I think it works. I think it's fun. I think it adds a bit of comedy. But also there's also a lot of serious moments in there as well. I think the main drawback to it is that kind of the main alien, the Morax, aren't revealed until about 5 minutes before the end of the story, and it's very quickly wrapped up. So I think that's a bit of a shame. But it's a solid episode of Doctor Who. Episode 9, It Takes You Away, is a bit more experimental Doctor Who. You don't quite understand exactly what's going on throughout of it. You end up in a sort of alternate universe. It's with the Solitract universe thing. It gets a bit complicated. Grace turns up again, but it isn't actually Grace. It's just a sort of projection, and sort of gives us a little bit of exploration of Graham's character and helping develop him and helping him overcome his grief of Grace in that moment. Or throughout, that's been sort of dealing with throughout the series, alongside kind of dealing with the whole Ryan Graham plot line of Ryan not wanting to call Graham his granddad, and ultimately by the end of the series he manages to achieve that. I think It Takes You Away is great, even if it's a little bit bizarre and you don't always quite understand exactly why everything's happening. I still think it's a great episode of Doctor Who. But then we get to the Battle of Ranskorav Kolos. It's awful. I know it's awful. It's got Tim Shaw in it. He turns it up again after episode 1. Seemingly for the big exciting finale, but sure, it wraps up with a nice bow, the plot line about Graham and Grace, that kind of, he finally gets his moment, he gets the chance to kill Tim Shaw and doesn't, and overcomes that, and Tim Shaw gets defeated, and that's it. It all ends. That's the series. It ends on a whimper. It has to be said. It's not very good, but, it's just one of those that we remember as quite bad. So we get the New Year's Day special Resolution. That's a whole lot better. It brings the Daleks, or a Dalek, back into the show for the first time in a very interesting way, using the sort of Dalek mutant outside of its casing and that trying to control people and use that as a way to kind of build itself back up into the recon Dalek that we ultimately get in Resolution and get much more explored in Revolution of the Daleks as well. I feel like it's a really solid, exciting Doctor Who episode. It feels like a step up on what we had during Series 11, despite it being kind of filmed as part of that series. I just feel like it just takes a bit of a step forward into a more exciting, more Doctor Who-y brand of Doctor Who in some ways as well, I think. I don't know, that's probably a terrible explanation. But I just think it works better. I think it's a much more enjoyable story. It's kind of a nice, sort of positive, hopeful way for the series to kind of end in that moment. It was a shame, of course, that was signalling another gap year, because we didn't get another episode for 365 days until Spyfall Part 1, which was a bit of a disappointment. But it was still a nice way to go out before we got that year break.
The name's Doctor. The Doctor.
The security of this entire planet is at stake. Can we rely upon you?
I'm not where I wanted to be, but I can work with this.
Protocol.
What? I don't suppose you've seen anything weird around here.
You believe this is alien?
What's the plan? You trust me, don't you?
Have I got to answer that?
Where are we? Paris, 1943? Oh, no. Something's coming for me. I can feel it.
Let it come.
Because we're your mates.
Family.
Get away from them!
You know things will get into the TARDIS.
Neither did I.
What have you brought here, Doctor?
I don't know.
So I've only taken about 10 minutes to get through Series 11, so Series 12, let's bosh through it. Spyfall, Part 1, Part 2, big, epic, exciting opening two-parter, reintroduces the Master into Doctor Who again, the brilliant performance from Sacha Dhawan, and having him, be this sort of undercover character of the character of O, who then turns out to be revealed as the Master. It's perfect. I love the reveal. I think it's excellent. The whole story is kind of a bit of a James Bond pastiche in places about spies and things, and has a lot of it just feels much more exciting, energetic, big than anything we saw in Series 11. I think you immediately feel like they've taken a step up with the new series, which I think is what it really needed after the slight disappointment and the sort of fairly negative fandom response, I think, to what we got in Series 11. And so with that, it also brings in more heavily the sort of narrative and long-running plot arc of the series that would stretch the whole of Series 12 and probably into Doctor Who Flux as well. The idea, firstly, of Gallifrey being blown up, that was done by the Master being shown in that first two-parter, and also just a hint at the Timeless Child. We get an image of it. We're not quite sure what it's all about at this stage, but obviously it reminds us that oh, that thing that was mentioned once in Series 11 is actually a thing and will be much more heavily explored later in the series. So that's kind of where we get left after those first 2 episodes. I think it was a really nice way to introduce the mystery of the series. The fact that Gallifrey was destroyed, that's pretty significant. I know it's been destroyed in the past, but I still think it's pretty significant. And so that was, something interesting to explore alongside, as we say, the Timeless Child as well. We get an Orphan 55, which we all know is awful. I don't think there's anything to be said. It doesn't do anything for the Timeless Child or the arc of the series. It doesn't really do anything for the characters. It's just generally a bit awful. Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, that's actually a much more solid story, a great historical again, with a historical figure that maybe we don't all remember that well necessarily, but I think it's great to hear his story given, he's quite an important person, and I think it's really great to kind of have that story told in Doctor Who, alongside a solid kind of villain in the Skithra and the Queen Skithra. Sure, some of the makeup and the costume on the actual Queen Skithra I don't think is brilliant, but as a story, it's pretty good Doctor Who. It kind of maybe fits more into the vein of Series 11 in some ways, but I think it's just a good piece of Doctor Who, a good classic historical with a famous figure in it as well. I think it's really, really great. And then we get Fugitive of the Jadoon. So yes, the halfway point of the series, they've been building it up, hyping it up this episode, that it was going to be huge. And I think it's fair to say it was. We had the Jadoon back, obviously, which we knew about, and that was kind of to cover up the rather larger mysteries behind all of this. And this is kind of where we really start to get into stuff that hasn't yet been fully resolved going into Doctor Who Flux. Because, well, the bit that has kind of been all done and dusted is the return of Captain Jack. He obviously appears in this episode in his very much just plot device, giving the companions something to do for 15 minutes of this episode while the Doctor does more interesting things, and teasing the lone Cyberman, which will become a key point at the end of the series. His appearance is in many ways kind of pointless and doesn't really achieve anything, but I guess at the time it was really nice to see him, even if in retrospect, in light of some of the things that have come out, it's kind of changed a lot of people's opinions on him, and I'm not sure people would, certainly if Fugitive of the Jadoon was being aired now, I don't think people would be as positive about it, and certainly about his appearance in that episode. But the other more important, more exciting part of it really was the introduction of a brand new Doctor. Like, that was huge. That was, the way that was done was so perfect, I thought, as we turn up at the lighthouse, and then we get, the Chameleon Arch idea, and unlocking the real Time Lord there from the human version, and suddenly the TARDIS being buried underneath the ground, and the Jodie Doctor discovering it before we get the Ruth Doctor turning up and saying, "Hello, I'm the Doctor." It's cracking stuff. It's brilliant. I love it. I think it's just one of my absolute favourite moments of the Chris Chibnall era. I think that moment where the Doctor rubs away sort of the dirt and sees the police public call box in the ground, and then turns around to see Ruth having changed her outfit and saying she's the Doctor, is going to be one of the most iconic kind of moments that I'm sort of remembered from this era. I think it's just that good. And then we get this whole mysterious confusion as to exactly who the heck is the Ruth Doctor, how does she fit in, they can't remember each other. And then we meet this Commander Gat, well, she's been a previous part of this story, and it seems there's something to do with, they're from the past of Gallifrey, a long time past of Gallifrey in some form, where certainly Gallifrey still existed. It's all a bit mysterious as to exactly what's going on, and the Jadoon sort of being involved in that, but not really, important. It's much more us trying to understand exactly where the Ruth Doctor sits. And clearly, there's a lot that we thought we knew that we didn't when we get... actually, that does call back to the Master's really clunky line just at the end of Spyfall Part 1, where he says, "Everything you think you know is a lie." And I like the sentiment, but the line is really clunky, and it's really hard to deliver that in a good, dramatic way. I think it's just, they should have rewritten that line. Anyway, that's Fugitive of the Jadoon. It leaves us on a very much, well, not quite a cliffhanger, but leaves us at that point where this whole stuff has happened, and we don't really feel like any of it's been resolved, but we're going to have to move on for 2 episodes. And so we get Praxius, which is, bog standard okay Doctor Who, with not really much of a villain, frankly, to it. It's nice to see lots of different locations explored in a Doctor Who episode, but as a story, there's not much going for it. Then we get Can You Hear Me, which again it feels a bit... I hate to use the word filler, because I know that, no Doctor Who episode should be seen as less important and therefore filler compared to the plot or the story arc episodes. I don't like that. but I feel like it's hard to not describe some of these as feeling like that, at least, when you get such a big revelation and excitement. So they're not addressed in any way across the next 2 episodes is really a disappointment. We get the character development dump at the end of Can You Hear Me as well, with exploring some of Yaz's past history and why, that you find out she's been quite troubled and bullied in the past and seemingly on, quite getting into quite a dark period in the past as well. And it's great to have that. I really like that we actually get some development for their characters, which was so kind of lacking and in such small ways in Series 11. But it feels like it was done just quite clunkily, quite quickly, quite, dumping it all on us at the end of that episode, which I think was it was a good idea, but I don't know how well it actually worked in execution. And then we get the final 3 episodes of Series 12, a loose 3-parter. Certainly this first episode is the loose part of the 3-parter, The Haunting of Villa Diodati, which, helps us to meet Mary Shelley, the writer of Frankenstein, and gives us the opportunity to reintroduce the Cybermen into Doctor Who, the lone Cyberman that Jack had been teasing us about earlier in the series, who is on quite a mission to kind of take over the universe kind of thing with and just cause general havoc in his belief about what the Cybermen should be and everything. And it's great stuff. Like, it's really a creepy episode. It really fits the sort of haunted house horror-y type vibe, introducing in this really scary looking Cyberman, the sort of half human face, half cyber face thing that's just really, really cool. And then the Doctor having to kind of give the lone Cyberman what he wanted, which is the thing that Jack told him not to do in episode 5, which then sets off the whole 2-parter and having to defeat the Cybermen.
Told you before that everything you knew was a lie. Now you get to face the truth.
Whatever you want with me, fine. But save my friends.
Brace yourself.
Now, this is in many ways where it starts to get even more complicated. We get Ascension of the Cybermen, which is generally more Cybermen focused. But also we get the very, well, at the time, I still feel is a bit vague and confusing storyline to do with this character called Brendan, this whole Irish village setting, and this mysterious character that we're following who seemingly can fall off a cliff and not hurt himself or something, and then gets his mind wiped at the end of it, and it's all exceptionally confusing as to exactly what it all means, what exactly is happening. And we start to get some understanding of this in The Timeless Children. It certainly seems the implication is that this character Brendan that we met in the sort of flashbacks of Ascension of the Cybermen is meant to be the Doctor, and it's meant to be paralleling with what we have to assume was what happened to the Doctor before they became the first Doctor. Because this introduces the division. Well, there's so much in it, so let's take it one step at a time. Let's do the Cyberman story first, because I feel like we're going to get so confused and muddled because there's so much in this 2-parter. So the Cybermen, we get the whole lone Cyberman leading his kind of army and wanting to, take them to taking over the universe and all of this kind of thing that they always want to do. And that's cool. That's most of episode 9, most of Ascension of the Cybermen. Then they get teamed up with by the Master in episode 10 when we arrive on Gallifrey. But then the Master obviously runs the show. He just destroys the lone Cyberman like that, which is a real shame because I thought Ashad, who is the name of the lone Cyberman, was a really interesting character, but he just gets gone in no time at all, and I think that's a shame. And then we get the Master turning the Cybermen into Cyber Masters, which are able to regenerate endlessly, so seemingly like the ultimate race basically that the Master can use to take over the universe before Gallifrey then gets blown to complete smithereens. It's basically destructed anyway. But then at the end of the story, the character of Koshamus, who is a mysterious, gatekeeper of the Boundary, which is how they got onto Gallifrey. He was a part of what happened with the lone Cyberman and causing a lot of deaths, and so he felt it was his duty to take the fall and blow up Gallifrey. And so he does kind of wipe out all life on Gallifrey, seemingly, including the Master, but he'll escape somehow. And seemingly that's the end of Gallifrey. I don't know where we're at with Gallifrey right now. I mean, we've seen it completely destroyed and brought back in the past. I'm sure it will come back at some point, but at least it appears right now that it's completely gone. My only theory at the moment is that Rassilon, the kind of, savior of the Time Lords, president of the Time Lords, he was not on Gallifrey supposedly at this time, based on Hellbent, when he was forced away from Gallifrey. In the timeline, it would suggest that he's still not on Gallifrey at this point, so maybe he could come back and raise Gallifrey from the ashes. I don't know. I don't think that's going to be a big plot point of Flux, but who knows. So that was kind of the sort of plot of the story of the finale, I guess, most of it. But then we also have all of this Timeless Child stuff to deal with as well, which is another whole issue. So yes, the Timeless Child, to quickly recap it if you haven't seen the episode for 18 months, the Timeless Child is the Doctor. It's some sort of child basically who turned up in a middle of nowhere on this sort of planet. It's a bit unclear exactly where it came from. This child came from. But is then collected up by somebody who ultimately becomes a Time Lord and becomes part of Gallifrey when Gallifrey is formed. They experiment on this child to try and get them to sort of, be able to live forever, and realizes that this child is able to endlessly regenerate without fail. The kind of gift of regeneration came from this child, not from creating it by the Time Lords. That's the kind of new law there. And then that is used to splice into all these other people. Tecteun's the name of the character who is testing the Timeless Child and doing experiments on them. And that's all explored, and we see that's kind of how Gallifrey as a civilization is formed, by injecting the ability to regenerate into these first sort of fathers of Gallifrey, be it Omega, Rassilon, maybe the other, which could be Tecteun. It's all very, very unclear at this stage. It certainly introduces a new starting point for Gallifrey, a new way it was created based off the Timeless Child, who was then revealed to be the Doctor. That the Doctor wasn't born on Gallifrey and grew up to be the first Doctor at the first point, that actually there were many, many incarnations of the Doctor in the past. The implication, it's all about implied things. There's very, very few things that are explicitly stated in this episode, in the Timeless Children, episode 10. Yes, it's explicitly stated by the Master that the Doctor is the Timeless Child, but outside of that, a lot of it is left open to interpretation. Certainly it appears that the Ruth Doctor is a pre-Hartnell Doctor, among many other seemingly pre-Hartnell incarnations of the Doctor. But exactly how many, how that all happened, how the Doctor became the first Doctor, we have no clue. We don't know any of this. And this connects into the Brendan storyline, this Irish character who seemingly grows up, finds out he can regenerate, and then ultimately gets his mind wiped at the end of the sort of flashback sequence, thanks for his services to the Division. That's another thing we'll get onto in a minute. And he gets his mind wiped, which seems to be a possible parallel. My at least theory is that it's a parallel with the Doctor, whoever the final incarnation of kind of the final pre-Hartnell incarnation of the Doctor. I know this is getting hecking complicated. Whoever that is gets their mind wiped, maybe regenerated, and then becomes Hartnell as the first Doctor, a younger, the first Doctor that we know. And that kind of starts off from there, with them not knowing about the fact they were the Timeless Child. Anything from the past, that's all gone. That seems to be what it's all about. Then we link into the Division, which is some sort of secret Gallifreyan kind of CIA type organization. I don't know, having to do secret missions for the Time Lords, which the Doctor in her past, previous regeneration life before she was the first Doctor was seemingly a significant part of. Doing stuff we don't quite know what, and that seemed to be why the Ruth Doctor was being chased down by the Jadoon in Fugitive of the Jadoon. It wasn't actually the 13th Doctor, it was the Ruth Doctor who was being chased down for some sort of crimes or things that she'd committed whilst doing stuff for the Division. And so it was left very, very open and mysterious as to exactly what the Division is, what it's all about. And I feel like that is an area that's going to be explored in Doctor Who Flux. I don't see how it's something that can be left so open, mysterious and ambiguous and not then get explored anymore. So I'm pretty sure that if there was any part of the kind of the previous story of the Timeless Child and all of that that's going to be explored, I'd say the Division seems like the obvious thing. Exploring where the Doctor's life was at before she became the first Doctor that we know, and what that was all about. I don't think they'll give everything away, because I think it wouldn't make any sense to do that, but I think there will be some more exploration of that, and maybe there will be some exploration of exactly where the Timeless Child originally came from, maybe who the Doctor's original parents are. Do check out, I'm going to be doing a video tomorrow giving more in-depth opinion, a theory on exactly how the Timeless Child will be involved in the new series. So I'm not going to give all of that away, but I do think that's kind of the key plot point that will play a significant part into Series 13 or Flux. And so we end that episode with, everybody surviving, getting it okay, but the Doctor being caught by the Jadoon from the TARDIS and being trapped in a prison somewhere in space, basically. Until we get the most recent episode of Doctor Who, Revolution of the Daleks. Proper big Dalek story with the recon Daleks being sort of scaled up by, the Jack Roberts and the Donald Trump character, among other things, but actually it's all the Dalek mutant trying to do all of this to create a Dalek army to be able to take over the Earth. The classic stuff. They then call in some other Daleks, some other Daleks to come and try and destroy those Daleks. The Doctor obviously saves the day. I won't give you the whole plot of the story. It's not particularly important. But it feels like most of the Timeless Child stuff is at least temporarily resolved, but I don't feel like the Doctor's completely over it, and obviously doesn't know a lot of that past. As much as she tries to kind of push it away, I think she does still want to know a lot more about what happened in the past, and I think that will be explored further. And of course, in that episode, we also say goodbye to Graham and Ryan. They decide at the end of the story that actually they want to stick it out on Earth and work together fighting crimes or something like that. But yeah, just that they don't really want to travel with her anymore. There's not any strong specific reason why, I don't think. That they've kind of reached that point where they don't feel like they want to go travelling all over the universe anymore. Yaz is fully on board, she can't leave. She's obsessed with the Doctor and cannot leave. But Ryan and Graham have decided that's it for them. They want to move on and be their own people on Earth again. And so we see a quite emotional scene, to be fair, a sort of goodbye for their characters. And then we get a really nice moment at the last scene of Doctor Who to date, with Ryan on his bike with Graham trying to learn how to ride his bike again, which is what opens Series 11, the beginning of the Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall era, with Ryan trying to ride a bike with Graham and Grace. But yeah, that just about recaps us on Series 11 and 12, guys. So that's, I hope, giving you a clue of what's going to happen. Of course, Doctor Who Flux is coming this weekend. There's going to be previews. Let me know in your comments below what you think is going to be kind of relayed from Series 11 and 12. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. If you think anything's going to carry over, do let me know down in the comments below. But apart from that, as always, hit that like button, that subscribe button, and I'll see you again very soon for a brand new video. Goodbye.